Hi everyone, it's CJK from How to Make Stuff. Hope you've been well and welcome back to my channel. As a crafter, I'm someone who hates sending leftover pieces of fabric to landfill whenever I've finished a project, and I am that kind of person that collects all the scrap pieces of fabric left over from projects, and I keep them in bags. I've even got massive bins at home where it's just filled with scrap pieces of fabric that I've just accumulated over the years. And another thing that's sort of happening in my life is I'll be moving houses soon, and one of the couches that will be at the new place that I'm moving to is a black leather couch. And I thought, instead of spending money on cushions, why not make a cushion cover out of the scrap pieces of fabric that I've already got in my bins and bins of scrap fabrics. And I've also noticed that over the years I've actually accumulated quite neutral tone fabrics, as you can see here, and very monochromatic tone fabrics. And what I've done for this project is I've actually collected all of the monochrome neutral colored fabrics and put them all together to make this cushion cover. So in this tutorial, I'll walk over with you the step-by-step process on how I did that, and hopefully you'll be able to provide a bit of inspiration and some ideas along the way. So hope you enjoy, and I'll get straight into it. The first step is to gather the fabric colors you want to use to construct your cushion. These fabric pieces were taken out of the scrap bin that I had. I'm using neutral tones today because they are easy to match with each other, but you can choose vibrant colors and match them with each other if you wish to do so. I cut all of my scrap pieces into squares, as you can see here, and all of these squares have been cut so that they are 9 centimeters by 9 centimeters. This is so that the squares have a 1 centimeter seam allowance all around the edges, which means I will end up with squares that are 7 centimeters by 7 centimeters on the finished cushion cover. We are now going to construct a large fabric piece by joining all the squares we have cut up. From the fabric we are going to construct, we will cut out the cushion cover for our cushions. Line up your squares next to each other so that no two colors are sitting next to each other. I've lined up 8 squares here and have randomly laid down the colors beige, grey, black, white, beige, grey and white. I've just laid them down randomly in no particular order, but just made sure that no same colours were next to each other. I've decided to work with sewing 8 squares for each row to construct my fabric, as I thought this would give me enough working space to cut my cushion cover. My cushion cover will be 42 centimeters by 42 centimeters. However, you can join more squares per row in this step if you wish to construct a larger cushion than mine. Sew the sides of each square with the square that is sitting next to it with a seam allowance of 1 centimeter. Continue to sew all squares together in a row in the row you formed. Before I go on any further, if you are enjoying this tutorial, please hit the like button, as that would help me greatly to get more views of my video. Please also consider subscribing for more tutorials like these. Once you have sewn multiple rows, it should look something like this. As you can see here, all of the colours in each row are randomly placed, making the rows look beautiful when they are put together. The only rule that I'm following is that no two same colour squares should be sewn next to each other. I'm doing my best to ensure that this same rule applies to when I'm joining the rows together with each other as well, so that no two squares of the same colour are touching each other when being sewn together. I do my best, but sometimes it can be unavoidable and you may end up with one or two squares of the same colour that are stuck to each other, but the main aim is to try to get a randomised look where colours are placed randomly all over the cushion cover. We are now clipping these rows together so that we can sew them together. I'm doing my best to try to not have the same colour squares to be sewn next to each other. I'm sewing 6 rows together to create one sheet of fabric. In total, I ended up creating 4 separate sheets of fabric, which will end up being the 4 separate faces of my 2 cushion covers. Once you have sewn all of the rows together, it should look something like this. I am now going to iron the squares down so that the surface of the fabric we've just constructed looks like it has a nice finish. We're now going to flip this fabric over and place the interfacing on the wrong side of the fabric that we've just built. If you don't have interfacing at home, you can make the cushion covers without attaching any interfacing at all. The only reason why I like putting interfacing onto mine is because it ensures the fabric on the edges of all of the squares don't fray. It just cases the edges in. It also gives the overall fabric you've built a more sturdy feel, which I like the feel of. If you have just the squares stuck together without the support of the interfacing inside of it, the fabric can tend to feel a little bit flimsy, but it's not the end of the world and it will still look really nice. I'm now placing a rough fabric over the interfacing I just laid down so that I can iron over it to infuse the interfacing to the fabric. The purpose of this rough fabric is just to protect everything while the iron is pressing it down. It doesn't have to be anything precious. It's very hard in this step to burn anything, especially because you've got a protective piece of fabric over the interfacing while you're ironing it down. I like to hold my iron in the same place for a period of time to really make sure the interfacing is thoroughly infused onto the fabric surface. And again, I'm not worrying about whether it will burn it. I am keeping a close eye on it, but we've also got this protective layer of fabric that's protecting everything from getting burned. Once you're done with infusing the interfacing onto your fabric, it should look something like this. Now that all of my fabric pieces have been infused with interfacing, they're now ready to be cut into neat squares, which will become my cushion covers. I'm drawing a large square onto the fabric that is 44 centimeters by 44 centimeters onto each individual piece. This is so that there is a seam allowance of 1 centimeter around the edge of each square, meaning that the dimensions of the final cushion will be 42 centimeters by 42 centimeters. I'm now cutting the edge of the large squares I've drawn onto the fabric. You may notice in this video that the dimensions of the small squares don't match up perfectly to the edge of the large square that I've drawn onto the fabric. This is okay, as you have a seam allowance of 1 centimeter that goes around the entire edge of the large square. As long as the seam allowance of 1 centimeter is thick enough to absorb the imperfectly lined edges of the smaller squares, the overall look of the cushion will still look neat and uniform. I'm just doing a quick check of each square I've created just to have a look at them and just ensure that all of them are roughly the same size. With my overlocker machine, I'm going to overlock one side of each square only, which is where I'm going to attach a zipper in the next step. You can choose any side to overlock. I've personally chosen to overlock the edge where the small squares have not lined up perfectly to the edge of my large square, as I'm hoping to sort of hide this edge where I am going to attach the zipper. We are now going to attach the zipper onto the side of the square we have just overlocked. I'm going to be using a white invisible zipper for this project to match with the colour of the fabric. So we need to place two squares next to each other like I'm showing you here, and have the zipper right side up placed in the middle of the two squares. The overlocked edge of your large squares should be facing towards the zipper. You then need to open up the zipper and carefully pin the zipper down onto the fabric. Once the two zippers have been pinned down, it should look something like this. And to ensure that the squares on either side of the zipper are matching up perfectly with each other when I close the zipper, one trick I used was to keep the zipper open when pinning it down to the first square, but then closing the zipper when pinning it down onto the second square. This allowed me to line up the small squares perfectly to each other on either side of the zipper so that it looks neat when you actually close the zipper up. Carefully sew your zipper onto your fabric. I'd suggest working slowly and carefully when you get to this step. Now we're just testing the zipper out once it's been sewn down, just checking that it's all working fine, and it should look something like this. We're now going to go ahead and pin down the rest of the edges and sew them up. You need to flip one square onto the other and pin the edges down, making sure that the small squares match up with each other on either side where you are pinning the fabric down. I'm using clips here, but it probably would have been a better idea to use pins instead to make sure that the position of the small squares stay in place, being neatly lined up with each other while you're sewing everything down. I've decided to change my clips to pins because I found them a bit easy to use for this step. So I'm now going to sew the fabric down, and I'm also going to sew all 3 edges up. I'm now going to overlock each of the 3 edges of the cushion cover that I've just sewn. It should now look something like this. I'm going to flip this inside out, and I personally like to leave the length of the zipper hanging and just tucking it into the cushion cover, as I think it adds a tiny bit more structure to the cushion cover. But if you want to, you can cut the zipper down shorter for a neat finish if that's what you prefer. I've also added my own personal tag here just because I have them, but I've sewn it down onto the inner side of the zipper so that when you open the cushion cover, you can see it on the inside of the cover. If some of you want to add personalized touches like tags, for example, tags that say the word handmade on it, this is a really nice place to put the tag. Otherwise, another good location for tags would be any of the cushion's edges, and you would have to pin your tag down when lining up the squares on the cushion's edges and sewing it all down together when you're sewing down the cushion's edges. As mentioned previously, this cushion cover is 42 centimeters by 42 centimeters because the dimensions of my cushion is 42 centimeters by 42 centimeters, the cushion filling that's inside of the cushion. So for those of you that might need to purchase your cushion fillings, I actually purchased mine from Kmart for about $4 when it was on sale, and I'm just changing the cushion covers over in this tutorial. And that's how you make cushion covers out of scrap fabric materials. If there's anything else you want to know how to make with scrap fabric pieces, let me know in the comments section below, and I'll see if I can think of anything for you and try to make a tutorial on that item. I hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!